Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 20th of October 2014, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson.
Afternoon.
Weather not too good, dull and overcast, with rain, patches of rain, imminent rain, repeated across the country. So we'll leave the weather at that and move on to the dire political state of Britain. And interestingly enough, several of you have pointed out to us that we've now got government departments and others talking about the state of the nation. I think we're allowed to say that the State of the Nation briefs were first of all started by the UK column, warning about what was afoot, including treason. Very interesting to see that the establishment is now trying to cover its tracks by stealing our clothes. Maybe we're achieving something. What have you got?
Well, of course, we're starting off with internet trolls because this widely reported in the news that internet trolls could face 2 years in prison under new laws. Well, of course, the laws aren't that new. It's a bill that's been in the offing for quite some time. But this is Chris Grayling saying that trolls are, quotes, poisoning our national life. And he has decided that he's going to introduce updates to this bill, the Criminal Justice and Courts Bill. Of course, what's at the back of this? Well, it's Judy Finnegan, Chloe Madeley, and the threats of rape involving pretty nasty stuff, I suppose. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's been interesting to see the response to this. So we've got the stories in the news, in the mainstream news, and then we've got so-called legal eagles like Jack of Kent and Joshua Rosenberg talking about this, and they're saying that it's not news at all, that this has been in the bill for 2 years, and that they're pointing out that you can find it on the Parliament website. This is exactly a screenshot from the Parliament website, and they're saying that Grayling is cynically misleading people just to get a response. I think that this has to be seen, Brian, in terms of the reinvigorated campaign against press, media, and particularly the alternative media. And while this may not be news in the sense that they've been talking about prison sentences for trolls for quite some time, and it's been in various speeches and so on, and they've been announcing it for quite some time. This is a continuation of the propaganda being pushed into the media by government in order to provide a problem which is going to generate a solution, a reaction and a solution, which is going to be ipso and the shutdown of freedom of speech on the internet and in the press. And so it would be a bit naive of anybody to think that if Joshua Rosenberg is saying that it's old news and we don't really need to worry about it, well, actually that should be setting alarm bells off, and that's something we do absolutely need to watch very, very closely. So I would suggest we keep an eye on that one.
Yeah, and as somebody's pointed out in the chat room, what is the definition of a troll? Of course, this is something which can now be gently slid sideways into somebody who is extreme, vexatious, and of course, potential terrorist. So fascinating to watch that happen. And I believe that there was some talk on, I think it was Guido Fawkes' website over the weekend, that Ipso seemed to be backing down over the Brooks and Newmark affair. We'll just simply say that Sir Alan Moses, chairman of the so-called Independent Press Standards Authority organisation, refused to engage with us when we asked him why he publicly prejudged the Mirror on Sunday at a Media Standards Trust hosted event at the Tory conference. So there's one standard for the press and there's another for Sir Alan Moses. But yes, some very interesting things going on here.
So the other piece of legislation in the news today is the Medical Innovation Bill. That is apparently, according to the BBC and others, going to allow for untested drugs for the dying. So this is being given government backing now. It's being led by Lord Saatchi, and he's been campaigning for this for a number of years. And what it's basically going to allow governments, it's going to require doctors to get the agreement of one other specialist before they start providing untested drugs on people who are considered terminally ill. I don't know what you think about this, Brian, but it seems to me that this is if it's seen in the context of the euthanasia legislation and so on, this seems like another very fine tightrope that is going to be walked here by the medical profession, where it could very easily slip over into the realms of turning terminally ill people into guinea pigs.
Well, I think that's absolutely where they're going. Of course, the problem, euthanasia running out of hand, out of control in the Netherlands at the moment. And of course, this is going to be sold on the emotive thing. You've got a relative seriously ill. Oh, then you should be trying one of these untested drugs. That'll be the thin end of the wedge. Where does it lead? I believe it leads to genocide. Well, if we've got that problem in the NHS, let's have a look at this one. Headline from our local paper in Plymouth, the Herald: Taser officer will not face charges over Plymouth Fireball death, but could face gross misconduct hearing. And the meat of this is that the Crown Prosecution Service has said that there was insufficient evidence to prosecute the officer for gross neglect, manslaughter or misconduct in public office. So the police officer, who of course isn't being named at the moment, turns up. He is confronted by a very distressed man, pictured, who's doused himself in petrol. And what does he do? He fires a taser at him, whereupon the man burst into a fireball and dies of serious burns. But according to the Crown Prosecution Service, insufficient evidence to prosecute the officer for gross negligence, manslaughter or misconduct in public office. So here's the Crown Prosecution Service, Mike, just giving a licence to the police to simply kill people. If you can't work out somebody covered in fuel is at danger of from a taser, then what are you, mentally incompetent? The officer shouldn't be on duty?
Maybe it wasn't part of the training.
Maybe it wasn't part of the training, or maybe the officers had empathy removed due to the style of training, of course, put in by ACPO. But this particular incident will disappear from the public mind. But there you have it. Police can't make sensible decisions about sparks and fuel. Presumably they can't make sensible decisions about anything, or not in Devon and Cornwall Police District. Probably leads on to prisons, I'd say.
Right, well, this is the Hard League for Penal Reform, and they produced a report today. Public sector prison officer numbers cut by 41%, and what they're saying is that that's in less than 4 years that has happened. They're saying that they used official Ministry of Justice figures to show this cost cutting, and they're saying that most of the, they're giving examples. For example, Kennet Prison, Onley Prison, Askham Grange, Ranby have cut more than half their officers in that period, so they're obviously warning of staff shortages and the risks involved with staff shortages. Their press release points out that this year alone there have been 54 suicides in British prisons, and it's a pretty serious thing. Of course, the Ministry of Justice is disputing their figures in the report. They're kind of squirming under it, but at the end of the day, what are we looking at here? We're looking at the systematic undermining of Her Majesty's Prison Service. They clearly intend to replace HM prisons with Sodexo-run prisons, perhaps. I don't know, but certainly private sector-run prisons. And I think we've seen from Peterborough that isn't necessarily a good thing.
Not at all, and brings us on nicely to Sodexo. So I'm going to say, for those of you who don't know, that Melanie Shaw was released on bail on Friday. I was present with another lady to collect her at the prison. Once again, there was a chaotic situation where, having been promised that Melanie would be delivered to reception, nobody on arrival, nobody seemed to know what was happening with Melanie. And even standing in the foyer of HM Prison Peterborough, we were unable to make a phone call to find out where Melanie was. So she was eventually delivered through that wooden door, very, very frail, almost unable to stand. and was simply left with us and 6 bags of her possession. There was no formal handover. And the important thing is that Melanie was released without having sufficient medication to cover the weekend, and that has caused her some significant problems. So I'm going to say to those of you who are following Melanie Shaw case closely, we're delighted to have Melanie out. She has spent some quiet time over the weekend. She should be provided with her full medication today, and that will help enormously. But Melanie says please bear with her because she needs a little bit of rest and respite to get over her time in prison. Nick, if you can just bring that one back on screen. I just wanted to really flag up this, that Peterborough Prison, Sodexo, this is just about £1 billion contract going through Sodexo. So this is a French company making profit out of British people being put in prison. And there's something deeply sinister about this prison because the outward face is of nice colours, flower beds, but behind the door we've got strip searches, bullying, solitary confinement, untended wounds, denial of medication, threats. And we now know we can add to that sheer lies because NHS England said that they had contacted Sodexo to ask about failures in Melanie's medical treatment. They were reassured because Sodexo said, well, of course she's had the correct treatment. So this is the face of Britain in 2014. This is David Cameron's Conservative government facilitating foreign companies not delivering the service they've been paid for by the public purse and essentially profiting out of the suffering of individuals. And let us remember once again that Melanie Shaw is a victim of horrific sexual abuse herself, both within her family and within the so-called care of Nottingham. It's pretty horrific. Okay, well, we will report further on Melanie Shaw during the week, but we'd also like to say now it's vitally important that we have as much public support for her court hearing, which begins at Nottingham Crown Court next Tuesday. The more people who are present, the more people who are present in court, the more likely it is that the truth will come out about these charges, which we consider to be fabricated by the same Crown Prosecution Service that can't bring charges against a police officer for deliberately tasering a man covered in petrol. There's an irony here, isn't there, Mike, that Melanie is accused of setting light to a garden shed in an unoccupied house. She's banged up in prison for 3 months. But if you're a Devon and Cornwall policeman and you effectively kill a man as a result of your action, Crown Prosecution Service, no problem. Well, we want to focus on NSPCC because, as we pointed out last week, we had emailed NSPCC asking for a telephone conversation with them to see what they were going to do to help Melanie Shaw. We sent this email off. They came back via their media team. They refused to speak about Melanie Shaw. They simply did not want to know, and nor did they see a conflict of interest in their partnership with the Nottinghamshire councils who have lost child abuse records. So, pretty interesting situation, but thank you very much to the viewer that sent us in this. So here we've got a Telegraph article, Britain's hidden slave trade exposed, in the first in a series on modern slavery. Chief political commentator Peter Oborne looks at government plans to tackle an insidious evil. So never mind Rotherham and Nottingham and North Wales and all of the rest of the children's homes. According to the Telegraph, the priority is modern slavery. But this is what our viewer noticed, that this whole article was in association with the Home Office, supported by NSPCC. So this isn't a free press article. This is government propaganda backed by the very charity that says it's there to protect children from abuse. And if we have a look at their website at the moment, this is what NSPCC is boasting, that they are the lead charity protecting children. Childhood shapes who we become. Interesting little statement. So they refuse to help Melanie Shaw, and they see no problem with collaborating with Nottingham councils that have lost child abuse records. And now their priority is not massive abuse in Nottingham, it's working with the government to distract people by the slave trade.
I mean, this in association with this is almost like the sponsorship of series on television, isn't it? It's really pretty obtuse.
I think this is one of the most disgusting things that I've seen. And of course it means, can we really trust the Daily Telegraph on any article they now produce? Who's produced the article with them? Is it the Treasury? Is it David Cameron? What we've got here is now blatant state control of the press.
I mean, in association with implies that there's been money changed hands, and then there's a second level there where the Home Office is supported by
a charity.
What does supported by mean?
Well, I think we might see a bit more. What I thought we'd call up on screen here is the Royal Charter under which NSPCC operates. Here it is. This is a video clip because it's a long document. I think there's 65 pages. We're going back to the setup of NSPCC in 1889, but they are being given tremendous powers by relationship behind closed doors with the Privy Council. So let's run through this document. Apologies for the slight jerky picture there, but we get the information up on screen. So you can call this up on the internet. You can see a great deal of legalese here, members of the council, powers of the council, board of trustees, regulations of the society. And when we get into the meat of it, here we are starting to talk about how it was set up and the power of this organisation. Now remember, none of this debated in Westminster. This is a charity working directly with the Privy Council, and this is the original detail here and the people involved.
When you say working directly with the Privy Council, what do you mean?
Well, their charter is awarded by the Privy Council, so at the end of the day, who brings them to book? Not Westminster, the Privy Council.
Yeah.
And here are the names of people who've been involved with this. And are they accountable to the public? No, because they're Privy Council. And you'll read here that they have purposes and powers. So they can act as a quasi-social services. They can act in power themselves. And who's given them this power? The Privy Council behind closed doors.
So you have to ask that an organisation set up in this way as a Royal Charter company with the full support of the Privy Council, you have to ask why there is any child abuse left in this country.
Well, this is absolutely right, Mike. If they'd been doing their job, presumably we wouldn't have any. But of course, they are caught out because NSPCC boasts that they have been working with every local authority in the country. So any local authority that has child abuse within that area, we can say, well, NSPCC must be equally guilty because they're working with the local councils. And it gets more even dirtier because, of course, if we have a look at NSPCC Executive Board, here we've got Peter Wanless. He's the man now brought forward to work with the government on the child abuse inquiry. Well, what can we say about this man? He was private secretary to John Major, Norman Lamont and Michael Portillo. I'm sure a few people would like to ask a few questions about that. But now he's tasked by Theresa May to look into how various public bodies have handled abuse investigations. But who controls him? The Privy Council. So to the public, we're led to believe that an independent charity is looking into child abuse, but in fact, it's the government's own vehicle. Viewers, listeners, if you want to investigate, please do. We'll just end on this, and thank you again to somebody who sent this in to us. This is a YouTube advert run by the NSPCC which is saying that parents need to teach children about their bodies. Go and look at this clip yourself. We've just taken a couple of stills from it, a number of children talking about their names for intimate parts of their bodies. And it seems to end up with this advert from NSPCC, and it's called the underwear rule. And it says that parents, you need to start talking to your child about which parts of their bodies are private to help protect them from abuse. Many people have commented to us, this seems to be grooming the children, over-sexualising the children, and here we've got NSPCC at the end of it. I have to pause at this point, Mike, because I'm running into that stage where you don't know what else to say. But we just bring this one up. This is the Express. Back on new scandal over child sex. There's the word exploitation. Abuse has been pushed to the side. We're now talking about exploitation. And here's the twist from this article. We're back on the fact that in the Birmingham area, 3 out of 4 of the men who were grooming youngsters for sex are Asian. But in Nottingham, where we've got youngsters talking about being abused and they're all white, no, we don't want to report that. And I think you found this little one from the Mirror, worth reading, because we're saying that British spies recruited a pedo IRA chief, and spooks used pictures of Joe Cahill abusing a 14-year-old girl in a car to turn him to do government bidding. So I find this article very interesting because if what they're saying is true, and I could believe it's true, we've got the British government happy to allow people to abuse children if that gives them some leverage. And of course, this is what politicians themselves have been saying, that the whips have been used within Parliament to effectively blackmail people by their preferences for children.
Well, of course, this has been a part of Northern Irish politics for decades, Kincora being an absolute case in point. Yeah. But the aspect of that story which I noticed was that there's now a suggestion that in light of this, that the scope of the Wolf inquiry should be extended beyond the point that it's understood to be at the moment. Yeah. And if we're talking about that inquiry starting to take 2 or 3 years, then really we're not going to see any kind of result from that anytime soon. And if they simply extend the scope to be so broad that it is meaningless, then that it's pointless, isn't it? I think I'll just say that anybody that wants to understand these types of inquiries probably should have a look at some of the early episodes of Yes Minister, because Sir Humphrey explains it in total detail, exactly how they divert attention, how they divert these inquiries down a particular path with the full view of having a particular outcome.
So, sorry, Mike, if I get this right, so we've got Wolf, who is, we still haven't had an explanation for the links through to Leon Britton, but she's going to take 3 years to do the report.
Well, that seems to be what they're saying. Now, they're saying that they're going to explain the scope of the Wolf inquiry and the terms of reference for that inquiry this afternoon. So we'll keep an eye out for that. But if what they're saying here is they're going to broaden that the scope of that inquiry, then really it's going to take forever, and it's going to come back with no result, isn't it?
Yeah, just going to get more and more woolly, take longer, and in the end you've got mush, which doesn't mean anything. It's like Hillsborough inquiry, really. Yeah. So if we can't trust the British government on child abuse, and we certainly don't think you can, of course you can't trust the British government on anything else it is doing, whether it's overseas policy or its reform of the police. And this was brought forward this morning, that the Association of Chief Police Officers are now boasting that there's going to be a complete transformation of ACPO. And where are they heading? Well, they are going to become the National Police Chiefs Council. This sounds nicely Soviet, communitarianism. We're going to have a council of police chiefs. But don't worry, because everything that's been suggested has been done in an independent review of ACPO under General Sir Nick Parker, KCB, CBE. His picture wasn't on the cover of this report, but I thought we'd get a picture of the man so that you can see who he is. We've just taken a bit of information from the report itself. Remember, it's saying it's an independent review. And the key detail is in this little paragraph here, where the following people are mentioned: Jane Kennedy, Matthew Ellis, Martin Underhill. Surprise, surprise, these people happen to be police and crime commissioners themselves. So we've now got the meat of this, that it's the police investigating themselves. Don't worry, it's independent. But we were particularly interested in Simon Duckworth, who we understand is part of the City of London Police Authority. And if we bring Mr. Duckworth into the screen, he's an investment trust director living in the City of London. Trust him, he's been to Cambridge. He's involved with the City of London Corporation, served on a number of key local authorities. He's working with the City of London Police Authority. He was involved in Olympic security, British Transport, Ministry of Defence. He's involved in everything. Nobody knows quite how he got there, but he's also pretty big in banking. I think one of the Barings investment trusts. So if we follow this through, the only person who could be considered remotely independent is our army gentleman who ran the whole show. All the rest of them are actually police or investment bankers. Don't worry, I'm sure they're going to get the child abuse sorted out.
Good stuff. Right, well, on Friday, we mentioned this article from Ambrose Evans-Pritchard. We suggested it was a little bit hysterical, and indeed, this has continued over the weekend because he's published another article, One Simple Reason Why Global Stock Markets Are Reeling. And so, well, in fact, he has published this, and Liam Halligan has also published what could be considered an opposing article over the weekend in the Telegraph. One thing that they do agree on, however, is that there is a crash in process, or at least beginning. Pritchard calls it a market rout. Halligan calls it a drama, but either way. So what does Pritchard say? Well, he says, it's no mystery why global liquidity is evaporating. Central banks have turned off the tap. They have reduced stimulus by roughly $125 billion a month since the end of last year, or $1.5 trillion annualized. This is a shock for the financial system. The ratchet effect is being incremental but relentless. We are finally seeing the consequences with the usual monetary policy lag. And he finishes off by saying that we're heading for a massive asset bubble collapse of all the major indexes, like the FTSE 100 and the DAX. Quotes, unless the blinking starts at the Fed and the People's Bank of China, and QE is creeping back onto the table already. So he's basically calling for perpetual quantitative easing. So we just keep printing the money and keep printing the money forever. On the other hand, Liam Halligan takes a slightly different view, and he's saying that big time Euro QE is not the answer. He's saying that long before 2007, it was clear that anyone with reasonable knowledge of failed monetary unions throughout the ages, that the Eurozone was suffering from a deeply ingrained flaw. To quote him, he said, either the Eurozone reforms the Eurozone had to reform into a single nation, or it would fail. Well, they can't, although they're trying to reform the Eurozone into a single nation, they can't do it quickly enough. And so the Euro is failing. And he concludes by saying, I know that the conventional wisdom is that QE is the answer, but as we often see, not least when looking back to the earliest days of the crisis, the conventional wisdom is often wrong. So two opposing points of view here with one slight agreement, which is that the financial system is beyond repair, really, and a bit of panic, particularly from Ambrose Pritchard. So what's the solution? Well, we'll just mention it again. The Bradbury pound. We need to split up the banks with Glass-Steagall. And if you haven't seen the articles in the this edition of the UK column, which I think you have there.
I happen to have one. I was going to bring this in a bit later, but there we are, front page of the latest UK column. Huge amount of work by Mike. And somewhere inside, if I can find it on the screen, is, here we are, article on the Bradbury pound, of course. Quantitative easing by another name, well, of course it isn't. And the whole article pointing out perfectly possible for the nation to issue its money as credit, thereby undermining the whole of this fraudulent international banking system.
Yes, so anyway, moving on.
Apologies, we've got the controls blocked here, hasn't it?
Well, this is sort of economic in a sense, because obviously power supply is a fundamental part of the infrastructure that supports our economy. This is a huge fire at Didcot B in Oxfordshire, and they're saying here that 25 fire engines attended and other specialist vehicles. This is not an insignificant event, because Didcot B provides 1.3 gigawatts out of our 80 gigawatt provision capacity at the moment. So that's a significant proportion has disappeared.
It's amazing coincidence. I don't remember a fire, in power generating infrastructure for some years, and now we're at this really dangerous point of insufficient capacity. Along comes a big fire. Well,
indeed, it doesn't end there, because just by coincidence, in Lincolnshire, a huge straw bale blaze, and to be honest, I didn't realise that straw bales were being used to generate electricity. But there you go, 24,000 straw bales, which were being stored for use at a nearby power plant, went up in flames just by coincidence. That
so how much electricity are they generating off this fire?
To be honest, not very much, probably. Right. So this is less significant for sure. This is, my view is clear from things I've said and written in the past. This hay bales should not be being used for generating electricity. It should be used for feeding cattle, for goodness sake. And it's ridiculous that these were even being used for this purpose. But anyway, two fires in one night, which affect the UK's electricity supply. Just a coincidence.
Just a coincidence. I don't think we're allowed to say that, because that could put us on the list of potential trolls. Actually, we'd like to give Theresa May an invite to come online, interview with the UK column. Theresa, we'd love to have you down here. We'll treat you very gently, free tea and coffee, and perhaps we can discuss the close down of the United Kingdom. Well, it is their kingdom, and we did mention this a little while ago, but we're going to say to people, keep your eyes on the butterflies, because we've now got some very interesting things happening in UK. A number of websites appearing which are all supposedly to do with rebellion. Lawful rebellion not mentioned, though. They don't want to go near lawful rebellion. But here, as you can see, we've got the butterfly rebellion, and that is now growing. So this has come off Facebook, obviously. But Butterfly Rebellion Youth has just been launched, and if you're between 16 and 20 anywhere in Scotland, then why not get involved, do your bit for a better future. We say this is absolutely the establishment and government at work. Have a look at George Soros and Open Society. But it seems to us that Lawful Rebellion has done such a good job that the establishment is trying to claw back a bit of the initiative. Well, if you're the establishment, you're going to need the placemen. And what better person to have here than young Owen Jones? This is a young man who's come out of nowhere. He's been on Panorama, or one of the panel debates on TV. He seems to know everything about international politics. He did get a bit squeamish when... who's the lady's name? Mother Teresa from Syria was going to... Mother...
Can't remember.
Yeah. I'll get it out tomorrow. It's just gone off the tip of my tongue. But the lady who spoke out about chemical weapons in Syria, this young man, centre of the picture, didn't want to share a platform with her, because obviously what she was saying wasn't politics at the time. So keep your eye on the Butterfly Rebellion. And if I just bring you back to the front page of the UK column, bit difficult to see on this scale, but plenty of monarch butterflies coming out of Theresa May's mouth. So I'm going to say UK column is absolutely on the case.
Right. Well, Nick Clegg, the master constitutional reformer, that's his job in this parliament, saying northern cities should be freed from the stifling grip of Whitehall. So he gave an article to the Guardian while he was in Stockport last Thursday. And he had this to say: "I don't think we should allow Whitehall to do what Whitehall has always done in the past, which is basically turn decentralisation into an exercise of hoop setting for local areas. I want to flip it around. What I ideally want is for us to enshrine, both in culture and possibly in law, a standing right for local areas to assume more powers from Whitehall. Powers which can only be refused by Whitehall if there's a very good reason for doing so." So what he's talking about is this devolution of powers to these new city-states, these feudalist city-states that they're trying to reinstate in this country. And we're talking about the absolute breakup of the United Kingdom. And I think if you're going to invite Theresa May onto this programme, then I would like to invite Nick Clegg to the British Constitution Group conference on the 1st of November and ask him to explain what he's doing in front of an audience, including some people who are presenting who are experts in their field. So Nick, if you would like to come and answer some serious questions on camera in front of a live audience, please simply get in touch and you will be given an invitation.
And treated extremely nicely.
Well, indeed.
Probably even cuddled.
And of course, the day after the British Constitution Group event is the Your Health Conference. Details on doomwatch.biz. Do have a look at that. And just before we go, can also remind people that the Crane Report is on tonight at 7:30 and at 9 p.m. Fracking Nightmare as usual.
There we are. I note somebody says that Brand, I presume that's Russell Brand, is advertising his chat with Owen Jones on his tweets, and it's going to cost £12.50 to attend in Bristol. More of the establishment. Totally agree with that. Remember, Russell is rooting for revolution in this country, which is actually the last thing we need. Keep it calm, keep it stable. Let's just get the lid off the criminals and paedophiles in Westminster. Am I allowed to say that?
Yes.
Okay, I have. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back same time tomorrow, and we'll bring you a little more detailed update on Melanie Shaw and what you can do to help. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.